Well, it's time for those October videos when the Halloween-themed, spooky yet not scary lists emerge from the darkness. So to kick off the horror topics is a highly requested idea. Viewer Shark Fan of the Sea asked about a list on the undead in video games during last year's set of Halloween videos. And after him, I received requests for lists on undead zombie fighting game characters from Piccola Asian, You Can't Beat K, L9, Robert Emerson, Ultimate Killer Combat X, Mintona Woomy Q, and Maurice Alexander. So for this list, I'll be covering the zombies associated with fighting games. Since the term undead can have multiple meanings, when I say zombies in fighting games, I mean decaying corpses that have been reanimated and choose to fight with their second chance of walking the earth. This list will not include characters who are ghosts or who have been brought back to life without suffering the effects of their body rotting away. They don't have to be completely mindless zombies or partake in the cuisine of brains and flesh, but they get imaginary points on this list if they utilize their zombie attributes in their respective fighting games. So let's hunt down the top 10 zombies in fighting games. Number 10, Mukuro from Last Blade. In the first Last Blade game, Mukuro was the character Shikio, who is a mass murderer with no redeemable qualities. He doesn't even like his veggies. In his arcade mode ending in the first game, Shikio dies when defeating the final boss, ironically bringing peace to the land. I'm not sure how canon that ending is, but if we get anything from it, SNK made sure Shikio being dead carried over in the sequel. Shikio was replaced with Mukuro on the roster of Last Blade 2, who is exactly the same animation and moveset wise, but was a zombified undead version of Shikio. It's like the zombie can only do what Shikio did best when he was alive, and that would be killing people blindly. He also gets a wardrobe upgrade with those chic facial bandages. His playstyle involves using dual swords that combine into a nifty sword boomerang. He's also great at spinning his blade like a propeller, which makes for stunning visual attacks. Though he doesn't do anything with his zombie traits in battle outside of drool and sticking his tongue out. Of course, the latter is somewhat common among fighting game characters, so I should not limit that to just being a pure zombie attribute. Number 9, Plague from Cardinal Sin. Cardinal Sin was one of those late 90s 3D fighters that was dark, gory, and edgy, like Mace the Dark Age, War Gods, and the cancelled Thrill Kill. Plague was the resident zombie who was a witch doctor in his past life. Of course, if witch doctors have the spells to revive people, then who is responsible for Plague coming back to life in his undead form? Hey Johnny, Plague just died. Who's that guy we called to reverse this? Oh, you mean the resident witch doctor? Ah, yeah, that guy. What was his name again? Plague. Oh, that's annoying. Whoever revived Plague seems to have gotten creative by giving him a peg leg and a metal claw hand. Of course, I didn't know him in his past life, so he might have always had those. He holds on to his witch doctor legacy by fighting with a staff and embraces his zombiness with some acid vomit. When he's the victor, he does a little dance, so don't let his decrepit face fool you, he's just having a fun time. Number 8, Zombie Bride from Tekken? Time to cover a scrapped character. They don't have to be playable on this particular list. When Tekken Revolution came out, there was a fan vote on potential characters that would be new to the series added to the game. Eliza the Vampire won, so we never got to see Tekken's first playable zombie on the roster. However, her concept has existed since Tekken 3. She was planned to be a wishful bride, killed before her wedding, and now she's back, for whatever reason. Let's blame Ogre, he usually ruins things. Tekken 6 was the next game to tease this idea, planning to give Miguel a sister who was killed in an airstrike, and now she's back, for whatever reason, still Ogre's fault. Alas, the developers thought making a zombie fighter would be too difficult, so they left her in the trash. I guess we'll just have to treat Nina's Tekken 7 costume as a consolation.
Going somewhere?
Number 7, Zombie Belger from Final Fight Revenge. Belger was the final boss of the original Final Fight beat-em-up game and died at the end of it. So apparently the makers of this game wanted to stay true to the canon of the game and couldn't just have him alive when you fight him at the end of the arcade mode, so a zombie is your final boss. Sure, why not? Belger is actually a pretty good zombie. He vomits undead acid and leaps on his opponent for a classic zombie bite. He also loses his body parts as the match goes on, a true sign he's committed to having that decaying body. And when you beat the arcade mode, he does the thriller dance on the credits screen, which never gets old when zombie characters do it. As for the part of his character that confuses me, he has the Dalsim stretching ability. So according to the Street Fighter universe, you can attain this skill through years of intense yoga training, strange experiments by Gil, or dying and coming back to life as a decaying zombie. Well, looks like Nash chose the wrong way to be brought back from the dead. Number 6. Zombie Liu Kang in Mortal Kombat. When characters were revived from the dead in Mortal Kombat, it was inconsistent until Mortal Kombat X. Scorpion became a Spectre with Hellspawn abilities, Noob Saibot went from Cryomancer to Shadow Man, Johnny Cage and many others got their original body back with no questions asked, and now they seem to settle on being Revenants that function with their normal body and powers, but they're just evil. However, when Liu Kang was revived in the original timeline in Mortal Kombat Deception, the developers decided to bring him back as a zombie, which was the first time we saw an undead decaying corpse in the series. Liu Kang was killed off in the previous game, which was meant to make a statement that the series was moving on to feature new characters as the protagonists. So perhaps the developers wanted to make him a mindless zombie to bring back the Liu Kang moveset without having the personality of the character present in the story. Nothing else was really different about his playstyle. He had these chains around his wrists, but they don't do anything, except in a cutscene where he holds back Shang Tsung. Seems like a new move they could have given him, but no, they're just supposed to look cool. The story reason Liu Kang's a zombie is because Raiden revived him, but apparently bringing the dead back to life is one of the various things that Raiden is bad at, along with giving himself messages in the past and paying child support for Kid Thunder. Of course, now he was Dark Raiden because he thought humanity kinda sucked at this point in the story, so he brought back his best fighter in Liu Kang to shape up the world. As a result, this zombie Liu Kang went around killing people with no memory of his past. The manifestation of Liu Kang's actual mind and spirit is an alternate costume for those who like the human Liu Kang, and it was part of his story arc in trying to stop his zombie body from doing wrong and getting his original body back. Liu Kang, I'd probably ask for a new body at this point. That one's kinda decaying and gross. Number 5. Nemesis in the Marvel vs. Capcom games. Nemesis isn't exactly a reanimated corpse as much as he is a mindless mutated corpse whose brain has been taken over by a parasite, but he's basically a zombie to me by my definition, so I'll count him. Plus, he's pretty lovable. I think he just wants a hug. An aggressive hug, but a hug nonetheless. As for his moveset, Nemesis smash, Nemesis shoot rocket launcher, Nemesis grab with tentacles. Nemesis fits the role of the mindless brute in a fighting game with armor so he can just hit things. And if they hit him back, he doesn't care. He'll continue the onslaught. Nemesis has more range than your standard armor-heavy grapplers with his tentacles and rocket launcher, but is still expectedly slow. Regardless, he's pretty cool if you like grapplers since you can get lots of combos started off as tentacle command grabs. Other than that, he has no in-game personality, but that would be asking a bit much from a guy who only knows one word. Number 4. Shenko from Darkstalkers, also known as Lele in Japan. If you saw last year's fighting game Halloween list covering vampires, you might remember her on there. That's because she's a Jiangshi, which translates to both vampire and hopping corpse. In the end, she's essentially a vampire zombie that's also a ghost, so she gets another entry. She's at least a smart zombie. I like her exchange with Chris Redfield in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, where she briefly explains the difference between a Jiangshi-style zombie and a Resident Evil-style zombie. I went over her moveset on the vampire list, but here I'll cover how she became undead. It was a result of her using a risky spell with her sister Mei Ling called Igyo Tenshin no Jutsu, which was meant to save their mother's soul from the dark after she was killed by a Darkstalker. This ended up killing and reviving them to become Jiangshi, with Shenko getting all of the power of the body and Mei Ling maintaining full control of the mind. With their powers combined, Mei Ling turns into ward paper that sticks to Shenko's hat to create a sane zombie warrior. Mei Ling got the worst end of the deal. Shenko gets the powers to throw infinite items from her sleeves that can defeat evil foes, and Mei Ling turns into a piece of spiritual paper that only works on her sister. Well, there's more to her powers than just that, but it's not the most glamorous part of the tag team. Shenko can't actually fight without her sister as the ward paper. The dynamics between them make them my favorite characters in the series, well, that and the random sleeve items. And with her abilities to phase through things and walk on air, well, I guess that would make her a good candidate for if I ever do a list on ghosts in fighting games, or something like that. Number 3. Solomon Grundy in Injustice Gods Among Us. Poor Grundy. He's a henchman for the entire Injustice story mode who is only meant to lose to the heroes. He's hurled into space, gets back from space inexplicably only to get beat up on once again, and he's nowhere to be seen in the sequel, which might have been for the better since we all know he would have just been another punching bag when we needed an extra fight in the story. Ignoring story stuff though, he's one of the most fun and unique grapplers I've seen in fighting games. For a big guy, he can really get some air on his jumps. He never skipped leg day. His command grab can either raise his attack, defense, or resistance to chip damage depending on which chain of follow-ups you choose after the initial command grab. Each follow-up is visually stunning. The chip damage resistance follow-up brings some of the swamp where Grundy emerged from to the battle by forcing your opponent's head right in it. He actually brings a good portion of the swamp with him to the fights. He can summon some ghoulish hands from the swamp to grab his opponent from underground. He can even use the stench of himself rotting away as a weapon by sweating out the swamp fumes, causing proximity damage when he's in your face. He shows how practical he is by using the weapons lodged in his back to slash his victim. Finally, his super move is where he does the tombstone. The literal tombstone. He smashes his own grave over the opponent's head. How did his tombstone even get in there? Is that like a driver's license to a zombie? I don't see a point A to point B correlation here. Did he just rise from the grave, see it, and think, "Hey, my name's on this thing, which means it belongs to me. Taking it, this cemetery won't monetize off my good name." Number 2. Squiggly from Skullgirls. She's a zombie opera singer who has her mouth sewn shut but can talk properly thanks to her friendly parasite Leviathan, who also keeps her sane where she does not succumb to the mindlessness of every other resurrected skeleton used by final boss Marie. Sounds like a lot to take in, but it all makes sense, I swear. Squiggly's moveset is based around her rising from the dead, using Leviathan as a rope-like weapon, and having Leviathan morph into other weapons himself, along with a few other details. Since Squiggly can rise from the grave, when her fighting partner tags her in, she comes from underground based on where her tombstone is on the field. Her tombstone follows her partner as he or she moves around on the screen, making her tag-in plan less predictable. She also has one of my favorite moves in the game where she buries you in a casket and that casket falls from the sky. And being one of the 3 musical characters in the game, she can sing with varying effects, like pulling you in as she sings a beautiful melody, or manifesting song notes into physical objects. She even hops like a Jiangshi in some instances. And that's just one of the various references you'll find with Squiggly. Her outfit is also really cool. I like the skull, I like the stripes. She shows that being dead is hardly a barrier for fashion sense. When did she actually change into that dress? When she was buried, she was wearing a completely different dress, and when she was resurrected, she was wearing her default outfit. I'm sure no one cares. For these honorable mentions, I'm going with characters that did not fall into the reanimated decaying corpse category, but definitely were undead in their respective games. Zato 1 from Guilty Gear. He's a guy that dies a lot, controlled by a shadow man. He sounds more like an organic body that's a puppet, but he's a corpse that definitely should be dead that's moving around, so it's kind of like a zombie. When he's brought back to life, his body shows no signs of decaying or the effects of being dead, and acts as if it never died, which differentiates him from the other zombies I'm discussing. Nash from Street Fighter V. He definitely was dead, and he's been put back together a la Frankenstein's monster, but like Zato, his body is more of a puppet for Street Fighter's Illuminati. Spinal from Killer Instinct. I'm not really sure what Spinal is. I always considered him a magical skeleton warrior, and thought since he's fully decayed, he missed his opportunity to become a full zombie. Defining zombie is hard. Let's just go to the top pick to avoid me talking myself into a hole any further. Number 1. It's not surprising that Darkstalkers, the franchise centered around horror-themed monsters fighting each other, would have multiple entries and the number 1 character on this list. That being Lord Raptor, or Zabel Zarok as he's known in Japan. So by looking at him, you can see we have a zombie rock star who can morph his body into various sharp objects and has a mouth for a stomach. I can see why he has universal appeal even if you know nothing else about him, which is partially why I thought he'd be a great Darkstalkers rep for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. But going beyond that into his lore, he's as hardcore as you'd expect. He has a middle ground as an anti-hero. A good summary of him was his 4-minute appearance in the Darkstalkers anime OVA, where he was touring around the world with his band, performing at the venue in exchange for a bit of souls from the audience. Hey, it's a fair trade considering he could just kill them if he wanted to. Then it turns into him and Felicia fighting off a bunch of Darkstalker hunters, and he has amusing one-liners the entire time. He even defends Felicia, who he just met at this point in the story, showing Raptor has a heart of some kind. And yes, that might be a figurative heart since I don't know what body parts he lost when he was zombified, but it's a heart nonetheless. In the game's story, before his death, he was a rocker with a big interest in the supernatural, so much so that it influenced the content of his albums: Oral Dead, Punishment, Noise of Heaven, Tripper, Fangora, and Devil. And that is indeed his library of fabricated discography. His final song performed live was called Sacrifice, which killed him and the crowd at his concert. It turns out, the lyrics to that song were from a mysterious book under a section entitled A Curse to Give Sacrifices to the King of the Mackay, which surprisingly was a curse to give sacrifices to the King of the Mackay. And you know what else that means? He plagiarized! Maybe the King of the Mackay took all of those souls as royalties to avoid pressing a lawsuit. Then Raptor was revived because Ozum thought he could maybe be useful in gathering souls in the future. The reason Raptor's reanimated zombie form can turn into zombie weapons is because... don't worry about it. And that Ozum fellow who reawakened Raptor kinda became Jeddah, so maybe it was Jeddah who was responsible for all of this. Capcom basically said, Ozum? Whoa, you mean Jeddah? He's been here the whole time. Who's this Pyron you speak of? And I think that closes the spellbook on Raptor for this video. So, where do these zombies rank to you? Were there any fighting game zombies I left off this list, whether they fit into my criteria or not? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next spooky video, or not spooky depending upon your opinion of the term. Bye!